Get her out of here. This gala isn't for people like her. The words didn't slip out. They were flung like a dagger, loud enough to rattle crystal and freeze silverware in midair. 100 chandeliers blazed overhead, but the glow only sharpened the cruelty of the insult. The woman in emerald green, tiara perched like a crown of entitlement, stood at the center of the room. Her finger cut the air as she shouted, her voice slicing through the hum of violins. She wasn't whispering. She wanted the whole ballroom to hear. And they did. Every guest in black tie and silk gown turned their head toward the accused. A black woman in magenta, still and unshaken, her arms folded. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence screamed louder than the insult hurled at her. The ballroom trembled with whispers. One guest gasped. Another clutched his champagne flute like a shield. A man near the back whispered to his partner, "Did she just say that? Out loud?" Phones began to rise, not to capture music, but to capture humiliation. The emerald woman smirked at the attention. "This is a royal banquet," she declared, tiara glittering under the chandeliers. "Not a shelter, not a street corner. She doesn't belong here." A uniformed guard stepped forward, his hand already hovering near the shoulder of the woman in magenta. Guests shuffled nervously, unsure whether to intervene or to pretend nothing was happening. The woman in magenta never moved. Not when the insult landed, not when the guard approached, not even when the Emerald Queen reached across the table, snatched up the engraved invitation card, and tore it clean down the middle. The rip was deafening. It wasn't just paper. It was dignity. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone muttered, "This is going viral." Another whispered, "She has a ticket." I saw it. Why would they do this? Yet no one stepped forward. The woman in magenta simply stared ahead, her face carved into calm stone. She had heard these words before at airports, in boardrooms, at velvet-rope doors that claimed exclusivity but reeked of bias. Tonight, she heard them again. The same script, the same contempt. Only this time, the stage was bigger, and the witnesses were many. The Emerald Queen leaned closer, her voice dropping but still sharp enough to cut. "Escort her out before she embarrasses us any further. People like her always try to sneak in, flashing something fake." The guard stiffened, waiting for the signal. The crowd held its breath. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. Because in this room of chandeliers and judgment, silence was about to become the loudest weapon. Hours earlier, no spotlight followed her. No velvet rope was lifted in her honor. She simply walked in. The ballroom glowed with excess crystal chandeliers dripping firelight, violins weaving through polished air, a red carpet lined with gowns like oceans of silk. Guests arrived in entourages. Photographers snapped at every sequin. Champagne trays floated past hands heavy with rings. But when she entered, no cameras turned. She wore magenta, not couture, not something stitched to be recognized from a runway. Just fabric chosen for comfort and quiet confidence. Her hair was pulled back, not in a sculpted tower like others around her, but neat, functional, deliberate. She carried no jeweled clutch, no family crest, no ostentatious badge of belonging. To the untrained eye, she looked ordinary. And that was the point. She wanted to see this room the way others saw it, without the armor of reputation, without the safety net of being announced. Tonight wasn't just about champagne toasts. Tonight was a test. She had paid for half of it. She had built the connections that made this gala possible. Yet as she stepped into the marble hall, she chose not to reveal any of that. She chose to enter as a guest among guests, stripped of power, just a woman with a seat and an invitation. And she knew what that meant. Because this wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated. She remembered airports where attendants doubted her boarding pass, hotel lobbies where managers held her ID like counterfeit, banks where whispers spread at the sight of her withdrawing her own money. Every time, the same eyes, doubtful, dismissive, ready to believe she didn't belong. So when she walked into this banquet hall, she carried those memories like invisible armor. At first, nothing happened. A waiter brushed past without greeting. A pair of socialites scanned her head to toe, then turned away with a dismissive laugh. At her table, two women exchanged a glance, the kind that said, "Who invited her?" But she kept her posture steady, her silence intact. She unfolded the invitation card, embossed with gold lettering, her name printed clean and unmistakable. She placed it on the table like any guest would. That card was proof enough, or at least it should have been. For a few minutes, the night moved as if nothing were wrong. Champagne fizzed, laughter rose and fell. The string quartet glided into another waltz, but tension has a way of finding its stage. And in a room this bright, prejudice didn't stay in shadows for long. It began with a glance from across the table, then a whisper, then the sharp voice of a woman in emerald, tiara glinting, her words already sharpening into knives. The quiet entrance was over. The storm was coming. The moment the tiara tilted forward, the room shifted. She didn't wait for evidence, didn't ask a single question. The woman in emerald snapped her fingers at a nearby guard as though ordering another glass of champagne. "Remove her," she commanded, her words loud enough to slice through the waltz. "This banquet is reserved for the elite, not imposters." Gasps fluttered across the hall. The violins faltered, bowstrings trembling mid-air before the conductor motioned them to continue. Music resumed, but the notes rang hollow, bending under the weight of the spectacle forming at the center of the room. The guard stepped closer. His hand hovered just above the magenta shoulder, uncertain but ready. His polished shoes clicked against the marble, each sound echoing like a countdown. Around the table, whispers multiplied. A man with slicked-back hair leaned toward his companion. "She looks out of place, doesn't she?" Maybe they're right. His date sipped her champagne, eyes narrowed, as if watching a play she had already seen before. At the far corner, a young journalist shifted in his chair. His press badge hung just low enough to be mistaken for decoration. He frowned, whispering, "She has an invitation. I saw it. Why are they?" His phone slid quietly into his palm, camera opening with a discreet swipe. The Emerald Queen wasn't finished. She reached for the invitation card lying neatly by the wine glass. Holding it high for all to see, she shook it once, then twice, her voice dripping disdain. "Counterfeit. They print these things in alleys, don't they?" The word counterfeit struck like a gavel, heavy and final. Then rip. Paper split in her hands. The golden embossing shredded, the name erased in two sharp tears. The crowd inhaled collectively, a sound that felt like the chandeliers themselves gasping. Someone muttered, "That's too far." Another hissed back, "Quiet. You'll get thrown out too." The magenta figure still didn't move, arms folded, eyes steady, as though daring the room to unravel on its own. But the Emerald Queen pressed harder, emboldened by silence. "She probably slipped in through service doors. Look at her dress, it isn't couture. Look at her hair, simple, unstyled. No one of status walks into this gala looking like that." Her allies joined in. A man in a velvet tuxedo chuckled. "She should be grateful we haven't called the police already." A woman in sequins murmured, "If she belonged here, everyone would know her." The waiter carrying champagne flutes paused mid-step, eyes darting nervously between guests. He didn't speak, but his hesitation spoke volumes. And then came the order, sharp as glass shattering. "Guard, escort her out. Now." The guard's hand moved closer. Guests shifted uneasily. Phones tilted higher. The young journalist's lens locked in. The escalation was no longer whispers. It was public, loud, performed for the entire hall. And yet, through the rising storm, the woman in magenta stayed silent like a fortress waiting for the siege to end itself. The guard's shadow stretched across her shoulder, but she did not flinch. In a room where every sequin shimmered and every whisper sharpened, she chose stillness. Arms folded, chin lifted just enough to meet the insult without bending beneath it. Her silence was not weakness. It was calculation. The Emerald Queen mistook it for surrender. She smirked, lips curling with the triumph of someone who believed the scene was finished. "See? Not a word," she declared, tilting her tiara toward the crowd. Guilt never speaks. But guilt had nothing to do with this silence. The woman in magenta breathed steady. Inhale, exhale. The rhythm of someone who had weathered this theater before. She remembered being 23, her first business trip, standing at a hotel desk while a clerk accused her ID of being fake. Back then, she had defended herself, words spilling fast, desperate, unheard. Tonight, she would not repeat that mistake. Instead, she let the insult hang in the air, heavy as the chandeliers above. Every second she stayed quiet, the tension multiplied. Guests shifted in their seats. A cough echoed awkwardly. The violins faltered again, bows scraping like nerves unraveling. The guard hesitated. His hand, once certain, now hovered like a question mark. He glanced toward the Emerald Queen, searching for confidence he no longer had. A man at the far table muttered, "Why doesn't she fight back?" His companion replied, "Because she doesn't need to." The answer, though whispered, carried further than intended. The young journalist leaned forward, eyes locked on the magenta figure. His phone stayed recording, but his mind was racing. This is different. She's not resisting. She's commanding without a word. The Emerald Queen grew restless. Her smirk faltered. She snapped again, this time louder. "Guard, do your job. Remove her." The command cracked, sharper, almost desperate. Still, the magenta woman remained unmoved. Silence pressed harder on the room. It wasn't compliance, it was defiance dressed as calm. It was the kind of quiet that unsettles those who rely on noise to prove their power. A guest near the stage whispered, "She hasn't raised her voice once." Another answered, "That's what makes this terrifying for them." And in that stillness, a shift began. The crowd's doubt started to fracture. Some looked at the Emerald Queen and saw not authority, but insecurity. Others looked at the magenta figure and saw not trespass, but strength. The storm was still building, but the foundation had already cracked. She remained silent, yes, but the silence was speaking for her. From the back corner of the hall, a phone screen glowed. Keith Alvarez, 24, a junior journalist invited on a last-minute press ticket, had been quiet all evening. He wasn't supposed to stand out. His editor told him, "Observe, don't interfere." But now his hands shook as he lifted the camera, trying to keep the frame steady. The lens captured the Emerald Queen, tiara gleaming like authority forged in glass, and the woman in magenta, still calm, still unmoved. Keith whispered, almost to himself, "She has an invitation. I saw her name on the registry. Why are they—" His voice trailed off as the red recording light blinked alive. Around him, other guests began to notice. A young woman in a silver dress leaned in, eyes wide. "Are you filming this?" Keith nodded, his throat dry. She didn't stop him. She simply muttered, "Good. People need to see." The guard stiffened when he caught the glow of the phone. His eyes darted to the Emerald Queen for instruction. She sneered. "Record all you want," she spat, loud enough for half the room to hear. "It will only prove she doesn't belong." But the opposite was already happening. 2 tables away, a middle-aged man pulled out his phone, too, pretending to check messages but angling the lens toward the confrontation. A teenage guest whispered to her mother, "Why are they treating her like a criminal? She hasn't done anything." The mother pressed her lips tight, then raised her phone as well. It spread like a spark, first one light, then another. Screens lifted, witnesses multiplied, and with each new camera, the weight of silence shifted. The Emerald Queen's voice, once dominant, now sounded shrill, brittle against the growing hum of digital evidence. The woman in magenta still hadn't spoken. She didn't need to. The crowd was beginning to speak for her. Keith swallowed hard, his journalist instinct warring with his fear. He remembered his first assignment, a protest downtown where officers shoved him back for standing too close. He'd frozen then, terrified, but tonight felt different. Tonight he wasn't just recording injustice, he was standing in the center of it. He raised his voice, not much, but enough to cut through whispers. "She has every right to be here. Why are you throwing her out?" Heads turned. A ripple of shock moved through the tables. For the first time, someone in the room had dared to say it out loud. The Emerald Queen's face tightened. Her tiara didn't look like power anymore. It looked like armor cracking. She hissed, "Stay in your place, boy. You don't know what you're talking about." Keith's hand shook, but he didn't lower the phone. "No," he said louder now, his voice steadier. "Everyone here knows exactly what's happening." The chandelier seemed to hum with the weight of his words. And just like that, the balance shifted. The woman in magenta hadn't moved an inch, but the battlefield around her was changing. The commotion drew him out. Victor Langford, event director, mid-50s, tuxedo pressed sharp as glass, strode through the crowd with the posture of a man convinced he owned every chandelier overhead. His shoes struck the marble with heavy authority, each step silencing another whisper. When he arrived beside the Emerald Queen, he didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to, or so he believed. "Who authorized this guest?" His voice thundered, rehearsed for microphones, but dripping with disdain. His eyes swept over the magenta figure as if she were an intruder caught trespassing. This gala is exclusive. Access is not for unverified individuals. The Emerald Queen smirked, triumphant with backup. I told you, Victor. She slipped in, probably forged her card. The torn invitation still dangled from her fingers like a trophy. Victor nodded once, curt, then turned toward the guard. Escort her out. Immediately. We won't have our donors embarrassed by a spectacle. A murmur rippled through the tables. Donors. Guests exchanged glances, some uneasy, some eager for drama. The magenta woman remained silent, arms still folded. The stillness was starting to disturb even those who mocked her. Victor misread it. He leaned closer, his cologne thick, his words sharper. People like you should know better. You don't crash an event of this level, not dressed like that, not sitting among those who earned their seats. The insult landed heavy. Gasps scattered across the hall, phones lifted higher. Keith Alvarez's camera caught every word, his hand trembling with adrenaline. From the corner, a woman in a silver gown muttered, "He didn't even check her name. He just assumed." Her companion shushed her quickly, fear written across his face. Victor raised his chin, scanning the crowd like a judge delivering a sentence. Ladies and gentlemen, rest assured this imposter will be removed. The integrity of this gala will remain intact. But integrity was already unraveling. Guests who once whispered now murmured openly. She hasn't spoken a word. She showed her invitation. Why tear it instead of checking? The Emerald Queen bristled. Don't be fooled, she snapped. This is what they do. Sneak in, pretend, drain resources meant for real patrons. Her words sliced across the hall, cruel, deliberate. The magenta woman's gaze didn't waver. She let the venom hang in the air, unchallenged, forcing it to echo in the ears of every witness. The silence turned the insults into confessions, and the room into a courtroom. Victor gestured sharply. Security now. Drag her out if you must. The guard hesitated again. Phones glowed brighter. The murmurs thickened. Even he felt the shift, the creeping doubt that maybe, just maybe, he was about to lay hands on the wrong woman. The Emerald Queen noticed his hesitation and barked, "Do it." But in the back of the hall, a voice rose clear, sharp, trembling but unyielding. Why are you so afraid of her silence? Every head turned. Keith stood now, phone still recording, voice steadier than before. She hasn't disrupted anything. You did, with your words. The room crackled. Victor's jaw tightened. The Emerald Queen's smile cracked, and the woman in magenta remained still, letting the storm collapse on itself. The hall held its breath, waiting for resolution. Instead, it got humiliation. Victor Langford's patience snapped. He snatched the torn invitation from the Emerald Queen's hand and flung the pieces to the floor, grinding them beneath his shoe as if erasing her presence. Fraudulent, he barked. Case closed. How? The Emerald Queen leaned in, voice pitched high with venom. Search her bag. People like her always carry tricks, stolen badges, fake credentials. Gasps scattered like glass shattering. The guard froze, unsure, but Victor pressed harder. Do it, right here. Let everyone see. The guard hesitated, then reached toward the magenta woman's shoulder bag resting on the chair. His fingers brushed the strap. Cameras lifted higher. Phones locked onto the moment like vultures circling a wound. She did not move. Arms still folded. Eyes steady. The stillness was unbearable. Victor snarled. Fine. If you won't comply, we'll escalate. Call the police. Let them drag her out for trespassing. The Emerald Queen grinned, triumphant. Perfect. Let them put her in cuffs where she belongs. The words landed heavy, cruel, echoing, louder than the violins that had stopped playing entirely. The music was gone. The gala wasn't a celebration anymore, it was a spectacle of prejudice. Keith Alvarez's voice cracked through the silence. Cuffs? For sitting at a table? His camera shook, but his tone sharpened. You're destroying yourselves on record. Victor ignored him, gesturing toward the guard again. Detain her until authorities arrive. The guard reached once more, this time bolder. He yanked the strap, pulling the magenta woman's bag into the open. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Guests craned their necks, waiting for evidence, for something scandalous to justify the humiliation. Inside, nothing but a phone, a notebook, and a slim black case. The Emerald Queen sneered. "Where's the jewelry, the proof of wealth you claim? This is all she has?" She snatched the black case and popped it open with a dramatic flick. Empty. She laughed. Loud. Shrill. "See? Pretender. Not 1 carat to her name." The laughter rang hollow. A few guests joined nervously, but most stared in discomfort. Some shook their heads. Others whispered, "Why humiliate her like this? She hasn't done anything." Victor's face flushed, but he doubled down. "Escort her outside. If she resists, restrain her. This gala is not a stage for stunts." The guard stepped forward, hand hovering near her arm again. But before he could touch her, she raised her gaze slowly, steady, unyielding, a silent warning. And for the first time, the guard's hand faltered mid-air. Still, the insult had been delivered, her invitation torn, her bag searched. Police summoned. The line had been crossed. The ballroom, once radiant with chandeliers, now felt like a courtroom. Every guest a witness, every phone a record. The humiliation was public, deliberate, irreversible. And the woman in magenta, calm as stone, let it happen. Because she knew the storm wasn't ending here. It was only beginning. The ballroom thought it had seen the climax. It hadn't. The torn invitation lay in pieces under Victor Langford's shoe. Her bag sat open on the chair, contents displayed like evidence in a trial. The Emerald Queen smirked, tiara flashing cruel satisfaction. "Call the police," she repeated. "Let them handle her." That was when the woman in magenta moved. Not frantic, not desperate, just a single motion, sliding her folded arms apart and reaching into the open bag. She lifted her phone with calm precision, the black screen reflecting chandeliers overhead. A ripple went through the crowd. Every camera tilted closer, recording. She pressed one button. On the other end, a line connected instantly. A female voice came through, crisp, professional. "Protocol Sapphire?" The magenta woman's voice was quiet, but the microphone carried it to every ear around her. "Yes, log the incident. Timestamp, video capture, all channels." Murmurs erupted. Keith Alvarez nearly dropped his phone. "She's documenting this," he whispered to the silver-dressed guest beside him. The Emerald Queen's smirk faltered. "What is this? Some childish performance?" She glanced at Victor, seeking reassurance. But even Victor stiffened. The language was too precise, too rehearsed to be bluff. On the phone, the assistant's voice was steady. "Sapphire engaged. Recording live. Do you want escalation?" "Yes," the magenta woman answered. "Escalate to executive audit. Flag all parties involved." The guard's hand recoiled instantly, as if burned. Victor frowned, sweat beating at his temple. He blustered, "What nonsense is this? You think a phone call will erase your trespassing?" But already, uncertainty slithered through the room. Guests exchanged glances. Words like audit and executive carried weight, corporate weight, not the language of pretenders. Keith's live stream chat exploded, hearts and angry emojis flooding the screen. "She's too calm," one comment read. "She knows something." Another, "This isn't a bluff. Look at their faces." The magenta woman's eyes flicked toward Victor, unblinking. "You've made your choice," she said evenly. "Now the system will make mine." Victor tried to scoff, but his voice cracked. "System? What system?" Her phone chimed once. The assistant's voice came again, louder this time. "Audit confirmed. All feeds live. Do you want me to inform the board?" A gasp broke from the crowd. The board. The word spread like electricity. Guests turned to one another, whispers racing. This wasn't just a guest with a phone. This was someone with reach. Victor's jaw locked. The Emerald Queen paled beneath her makeup. Even the guard stepped back, hands now firmly at his side. The balance had shifted. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't lifted a finger in anger. She had simply pressed a button, and the gala was no longer their stage. It was hers. The air thickened. Every chandelier sparkled like an interrogation lamp. Every phone camera fixed on the woman in magenta. She lowered her device, not hurried, not hesitant, just deliberate, as if orchestrating silence itself. Her gaze swept across the hall, from the guard frozen mid-step, to Victor Langford stiff at the center, to the Emerald Queen clutching her tiara like it might shield her from truth. Then she spoke. "I don't need an invitation," she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried like thunder over glass. Because this entire event exists because of me. The words dropped heavy. Gasps cracked through the tables. Someone whispered, "What did she say?" Another muttered, "No, that can't be." She took a step forward, heels clicking against marble like a gavel striking order. "For months, I've funded this gala. I signed every check, approved every contract, wrote every line item that made tonight possible. You toast with champagne bought by my contributions. You stand under chandeliers I paid to restore. And you call me an imposter?" Keith Alvarez's live stream surged, comments flooding faster than he could read. "She owns it. She owns the whole thing." Victor's face blanched. He stammered, searching for control. "That's ridiculous. If you really—" She cut him off with one glance, sharp as a blade. "Do you think I would activate Protocol Sapphire if I weren't who I said I am? Do you think the board would answer my call?" The Emerald Queen shook her head in denial, her voice brittle. "Lies. This is a performance. No one like you." The magenta woman stepped closer, her presence filling the space between them. "No one like me?" she repeated softly, almost tenderly, before her tone hardened into steel. "Then answer me this. Why does every contract in this building carry my signature?" The room erupted in murmurs. Phones zoomed closer, faces leaned in. The chandeliers no longer glowed for Victor or the Emerald Queen, they glared down at them, exposing their arrogance. She straightened her shoulders, her voice steady, final. "I am not a guest. I am not an intruder. I am the principal sponsor, the lead investor, the board's largest stakeholder." Gasps turned into open disbelief. A woman at table 7 clapped a hand to her mouth. A man in velvet whispered, "Dear God, it's her." Keith's camera caught it all, the stunned faces, the collapsing certainty of those who had mocked her, the slow, undeniable shift of power. The Emerald Queen stumbled a step back, tiara tilting as if even it wanted to fall away. You can't be—" But she was. And the room knew it. For a moment, silence held. A ballroom, once proud and glittering, now felt like it had lost its ceiling, like the chandeliers themselves were about to crash down on those who mocked her. Then the unraveling began. Victor Langford's jaw opened, closed, opened again. Words failed him. The man who commanded stages with practiced authority suddenly looked like a clerk caught stealing from the till. Sweat trickled down his temple, leaving a dark sheen on his polished skin. This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. "Had I known, had we been properly informed." The crowd didn't believe him. Phones stayed raised, lenses merciless. His excuses dissolved into the air like smoke. The Emerald Queen's tiara tilted as she shook her head violently. No, she's lying. She has to be lying." Her voice cracked, brittle. She grabbed a guest's arm, desperate. Tell them this is a trick." The guest pulled away, disgust plain in her eyes. Around the room, others began to mutter. Some even laughed short, sharp bursts at the irony. The woman who accused another of pretending now looked like the only fraud in the hall. The guard who had reached for the magenta woman's arm stepped back entirely, retreating toward the wall as if distance could erase his involvement. His eyes darted to the cameras, then to the floor. He whispered, "I was following orders," but no one cared. Keith Alvarez's livestream chat exploded in real time. "Look at their faces. He's sweating bullets. She hasn't raised her voice once, and they're falling apart." Guests who had stayed quiet now shifted openly. A man in a velvet tuxedo whispered, "I won't donate another $1 if they treat her like that." A woman in pearls nodded, her voice firm. "Neither will I. This is shameful." The collapse spread, power drained from Victor's posture. The Emerald Queen's fury turned to pleading, her words stumbling. I didn't know, I thought," but excuses carried no weight. Not under chandeliers funded by the woman she tried to erase, not in front of hundreds of witnesses. Even the musicians in the corner lowered their instruments, watching like jurors at a trial. The violins no longer filled the room. Judgment did. And through it all, the magenta woman stood still, calm, untouched. Her silence had become gravity, pulling arrogance into dust. The ballroom wasn't with Victor or the Emerald Queen anymore. It was with her. Phones panned, voices rose. Guests clapped softly at first, then louder, until the applause broke like thunder. A spontaneous verdict delivered in real time. Guilty not her, but them. Victor's shoulders sagged. The Emerald Queen's tiara slipped. The guard pressed himself into the wall. Collapse complete. The applause still echoed when she lifted her phone again. One simple motion, but it silenced the room faster than a gavel striking oak. Every guest leaned in, every camera tilted closer. "Carla," she said, voice calm even. The assistant's reply was instant, her tone steady and sharp enough to cut the air. "Yes, ma'am. Protocol Sapphire remains live. All feeds recording." The magenta woman's gaze never left Victor and the Emerald Queen. "Terminate their access. Effective immediately." The words were soft, but they detonated. Carla's voice confirmed, "Processing now." Victor blinked, confused. Then the sound came, beep, beep. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He yanked it out, and the screen glowed red. Assess revoked. A murmur surged through the guests. The Emerald Queen reached for her clutch, her event credentials, her digital ID. She tapped the screen. It flashed once, then locked. Invalid. She froze, eyes wide, lips parting in disbelief. No, this isn't possible." The guard checked his earpiece dead. His radio crackled once, then went silent. His clearance, too, erased in seconds. Phones caught every expression. Panic, confusion, collapse. Victor tried to recover, his voice trembling. This is a mistake. Surely we can review this." Her eyes cut him off. Steady, final. "There is no mistake. You tried to erase me. Now I erase you." Gasps rippled again. A man in the back whispered, "She just fired them. On the spot." "Oh." The Emerald Queen staggered, clutching her tiara as if it were the last proof of her worth. "You can't do this," she stammered. "You don't have the right." The magenta woman's voice sliced through. "I don't need the right. I have the power, and you just handed me the reason." Applause broke again, louder, freer. Some guests even stood, their clapping turning into cheers. Phones captured Victor's collapse, the Emerald Queen's trembling hands, the guard retreating to the shadows. Keith Alvarez's live stream chat went wild. "They're finished. This is history. She just ended their careers in front of everyone." The magenta woman lowered her phone slowly, her calm now terrifying in its certainty. "Effective this moment, you hold no position here, no access, no authority. You will not touch another contract, another guest, another seat under these chandeliers." Victor's knees weakened. The Emerald Queen's tiara slipped, clattering to the marble floor. The sound rang louder than the orchestra had all evening. The judgment had been delivered. Swift, irrevocable, public. And the hall knew justice had just been served. The tiara hit the marble floor and rolled, a hollow crown with no kingdom left to claim. Guests stared, phones angled down to capture every frame of defeat. Victor stood paralyzed, his authority dissolved into pixels of humiliation. The guard melted into the shadows, no longer willing to be part of the spectacle, and at the center of it all, the woman in magenta remained calm. She let the noise swirl around her, the claps, the gasps, the rising tide of whispers, and then, when the timing was perfect, she spoke. You mistook silence for weakness. Her voice was low, deliberate, each syllable cutting clean. But silence is power when you carry the truth. And tonight that truth just removed you from the very room you thought you owned. Phones recorded every word. Audiences at home watching as history crystallized in real time. Keith Alvarez's live stream counter soared thousands, then tens of thousands, flooding the chat with fire emojis, words of outrage, and cries of vindication. She turned slowly, her gaze sweeping across the room, no longer just a guest, but the axis on which the night now spun. I didn't need to shout, I didn't need to beg. Justice does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives with stillness, with certainty. The applause built again, rolling like thunder against the marble walls. Guests stood, one by one, until the entire ballroom was on its feet. Some clapped, some recorded, some simply stood in awe, but all were united in witnessing what had just unfolded. Her phone chimed softly in her hand. Carla's voice returned. "Ma'am, all access terminated. Records logged. Audit complete." She nodded once, a gesture so slight yet so final. "Good. Leave the record open. Let it remind them what silence can do." Victor tried to speak, but his words drowned under the wave of approval crashing through the hall. The Emerald Queen bent down to retrieve her tiara, but when her fingers touched it, she hesitated. Even the crown had betrayed her, rolling to rest at the feet of the very woman she'd tried to erase. The magenta woman didn't pick it up. She only glanced at it, then back at the crowd. And then came the line, sharp, unforgettable. Drop the mic. I don't need to hold the crown, I own the palace. The room erupted. Applause shook the chandeliers. Cheers lifted like an anthem. Keith's live stream chat screamed in all caps, viewers flooding from every corner of the world. The night was no longer a gala, it was a verdict. And as the cameras kept rolling, the message burned into every witness, every guest, every viewer across the globe. Dignity does not need volume. Power does not need permission. Justice had walked into the ballroom in magenta, and it had walked out victorious.